Do you know how to make that bigger? If you use the zoom at the bottom right-hand side, yeah.
Is that good?
Maybe one more. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's better. Yeah.
Okay, we are live.
All right, then I'll call this meeting of Facilities Finance Committees to order and ask if there's any public comment.
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Okay, then we'll move into a presentation by Mrs. Peggy Lee Clark, who I see is here and all ready to enlighten us about the activities of PAID over the last year.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. And do I have sharing screen capability?
Yes, you do. Go ahead, Mrs. Clark.
Great, fantastic. Thank you.
You should see a big green button that says share screen.
Right. Not what I want. Yikes. Can you see that?
No.
No. Okay. Let's,
I'll tell you what, I believe that someone from your organization sent it to me. If you'd like, give me 1 second to look it up. You can do an intro and I'll.
sure. Okay, to keep things going. Okay, so thank you so much for having me today. Uh-oh.
I got it.
Okay, and I'm back, right?
Back.
You never went
think
away. You've been here the whole time. We're just
I
waiting
have been
for
there. Okay.
Rodriguez to get his act together and get this thing up on the screen.
There we go. All right. So sorry. I'm just trying to get out of the million screens that I have loaded now. So I want to get back to everybody. Okay, so great to see everybody. I see the clock ticking, so I'm going to hurry up. So we'll go right to the second slide, which is, if you can see it right here, is 215 South Washington, which is the former Pottstown plating. To the left of your screen, the top left of your screen, you will see that this was pretty much the condition except for open pits before the cleanup started. I did want to bring these pictures to you because for those that were not able to join us on the day of the celebration, you see the ribbon cutting at the right, the bottom right, and then the top of where it is. This is what happens when the school district, the borough, the county, and the state and federal governments work together. You can have a place which is no longer blighted. It is environmentally clean, and it now has an employer that started with just 20 employees, which they are now growing. I believe at last count, they were up to 25, and they continue to grow. And it is back on the tax rolls after not receiving taxes for more than 10 years. Just for 1 year, the tax revenue is $50,538. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. That's a real success. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're hearing about, and I did just check the state's unemployment numbers. So Pottstown and Norristown, as far as the county, usually run neck and neck. We are sitting at a percentage, though, in Pottstown that is still lower than the national average and the rest of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And then L&I did further studies, and there's a deeper dive. And in 2023, in the entire county of 62 municipalities, we were number 9. The borough of Pottstown was number 9 out of 62. And you can see we were in very good company in that top 10. So I think that's something that everybody should really be proud of. I know that I hear all the time, yes, but what types of jobs? I am seeing the level of jobs and the amount being paid for those jobs continue to increase. Companies are expanding, especially those with highly technical skills or in advanced manufacturing. The residential and commercial sales, you can see for yourself, we're definitely on an upward trajectory. The only place in 2023 where we lost some traction was commercial leasing, as far as what the rates were that were being paid for commercial leases. Next slide, please. Land bank. So what does Pottstown Area Economic Development have to do with Pottstown Land Bank? Well, we administer, because we are close to the investment community and because we understand the basics of a real estate transaction, really made sense for the economic development entity to help in the administration. So it took a long time. It took a few years, not compared to plating, which was over 10, took a few years to get everything, the policies and procedures, and to the place that Land Bank was in a position to purchase properties. This is a before and after picture. This happens to be on Gable Avenue in the borough of Pottstown. It was one of the first houses that was acquired by the Land Bank and now has been redone. And just to give you some figures about the land bank, so the land bank does buy things out of sheriff sale, which does a really good thing because the land bank then is able to get the properties. They, by statute, they have the ability to have a priority bid, and it really keeps speculators from out of the mix. So there are 6 properties back on the tax rolls. 5 of them were back on 2024, and the 6th was just sold this year. The borough income tax from these 5 properties in 2024 was $783, and Pottstown School District's income on 5 properties is $5,590.95. That will double after the 5 years is up, the way that is reinvested and the administration of the land bank. There's 50% of 5 years of taxes that come back to the land bank. When that 5 years is up, the full amount will be coming back to the taxing authorities. Next slide, please. I really needed to highlight, your chair was recognized for his fantastic, really accurate reporting and storytelling of PAID's history. And so we recognized him at the Pottstown Area Economic Development Pottstown Progress Awards or luncheon this year.
Thank you, Peggy. Checks in the mail.
Yeah. Good to know. All right. So, and of course, the opinions he expresses in his writings have nothing to do with what the school board thinks. So much more than just a street. It is something that I continue to repeat to certainly the staff have PAID as well as the board. One of the comparisons that we get consistently is wish we could be like Phoenixville. And I say, but we're so much more than just a street. I think Pottstown has positioned itself very well in the fact that we are diversified. We don't have all our eggs in one basket. It's not just about downtown. It's not just about manufacturing. It's not just about retail. It's not just about office. I think that anybody that follows what's going on in the marketplace, anybody that is really stuck with a lot of one type of offering in real estate is really in it's in a bad place. It's in a very challenging place. So you can see these are all the things that are happening. And I really, there's just so much behind the scenes that is going on as far as employment. Some of the things being highlighted here are Robinson Street and the Keep project, as well as Dana, is in the bottom right-hand corner. The left-hand top corner is Precision Polymer that continues to add workforce, as does Video Ray. Next slide. next phase of projects. You may have noticed that right at the river there, the greening space of Montgomery County Community College, the old Kiwi Shoe Factory, they really put a lot of effort into that building. It was quite something. It looked like many of the other blighted old buildings in the borough until the college made that commitment to that building. And now they are taking what was cement and parking spaces and really greening that space and making it beautiful place. 269 and 305, everybody was very excited. If you followed social media, that is the Lastic Furniture store across the street on the 300 block is what was the former J.C. Penney's. It's the same developer, and this will all be part of the same project. They have been through planning, they've been through zoning on the projects or the buildings that needed that, so we're moving forward on that. White City Group, 276, 284 North Hanover Street. This will be an adaptive reuse project of an old warehouse property. 84 one-bedroom units, 1 two-bedroom units. Very conscious. I'm very conscious, and your superintendent knows this, about any further pressures on the school district. So any multi-unit residential, we are very clear about what we are looking for. Restream, many of you may know it if you've been around for a while. Pottstown Sustainability Energy Plant, that is a green technology plant. Again, we've been working on this for over 4 years now, but it has been moving forward. They have an international partner. They are signing off on loan documents hopefully this week. And from there, we should start to see things moving in about 30 to 45 days. And then most recently, if you have been following along with the council meetings, we are proposing a business improvement district in a few different areas of the borough. And I know I'm almost over time, so I want to go to the next one. So 7 reminders about economic development. I use this slide again and again and again because I think it's really important to remind everybody. Everybody's not going to agree with what is happening. We just do the best we can with what we think will be future facing for the borough and what will be, if you strip all our pretty language away at paid, we are just supposed to increase the tax base. That's what we're here for. Some projects will never come to fruition. Some people jump the gun, they get very excited about their project, and they don't have all their ducks in a row, and things fall apart, or the market conditions change. Beautiful old buildings have a lot of costly warts. Most recently, we had a huge win. Joe Cerisi introduced a bill for us. We are looking to help the development community, those buildings, especially in the downtown, for new uses to bring them up to current code conditions. Really expensive. Numbers don't work. We have a House bill that passed through the House, and now are looking for a sponsor in the Senate to keep the bill moving forward. If you are doing land development, you will need DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Redevelopment Authority on speed dial. It's just the way things are. Everything takes longer than anyone had ever planned for. Remember, 10 years, 5 years. Development must be improve the lives and be inclusive. And there are more good actors than bad actors in Pottstown. And that is my presentation, and I'm sorry for going over time.
So does anyone have any questions? Mr.
Yes, thank you. Peggy Lee, thank you very much. Very informative presentation. A question for you.
Yes.
In the early slides, you indicated some statistics, which were all very favorable in terms of number of jobs being created, value of properties being sold. But the one area that you talked about, if I understood you correctly, you said that leasing of commercial properties was down. Does that mean that the amount that is being received per square foot is down, or the
Yes,
so
yes.
Okay, so what's your analysis of that?
So I believe that I believe that a lot of it is due to having a lot of commercial property available. So a lot of businesses that have downsized, right, because they have a mixed workforce or they're completely remote, they only need a little bit of space. So it has made those owners or those investment companies a lot less able to charge higher rates. So those people leasing space have generally just gotten a lot more savvy. The other piece to that is the small business owner, because things are so tight, they are really looking for negotiating and having, a better rate.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Spence?
So I don't have a question. I just have a couple of statements. One, the purpose of the land bank is for affordable housing. And I don't understand, I guess it is a question. I don't understand how Paid became the administrator of that, because it's definitely not going to affordable housing. I mean, you used an example of Gable Street that sold for way above affordability for anyone that was in the criteria of needing affordable housing. And so now Paid is gonna develop or create, so-called, started the process to create a small business district or a commercial district. I'm not sure how that could be when you're administrating, you're in charge of the land bank. You have the economic development paid, and some hand in the chamber. So how that doesn't, it's a conflict. It's too many conflicts, right? There's a conflict of interest because Paid is not in the interest of the small business community. There's several small businesses, myself included, that don't feel as if Paid is for the small business owners. And the fact that you have real estate license just adds extra conflict to it, because people looking to rent a commercial property are told by the owners to contact you, and then they're charged a fee. So anyway, my comment is that Passtown is in the need of a lot of resources. And if Paid is really to deliver, it has to open up that mindset from a small mindset to a very larger mindset that this is not just to give properties to buddies of people that belong to Paid. It should be, I mean, Gable Street went to a family member of a school board member. So, and then we waived the taxes on that, right? So that is, it's so many conflicts right there in just that alone. And then the restrictive deed got removed. So then now they can sell it before 5 years. So all of those things are my comments. And hopefully Paid won't be the administrator of a small business district, because small businesses are not being seen or heard in the district. I've met with several, we meet once a month, and they all come with the same complaints about Paid. Hopefully they'll come to this meeting and give a public comment about it.
Thank you. Mrs. Johnson?
Peggy, you said something really interesting. Like, I've heard people say, well, what does Paid do? Like, what is it? What is it? It kind of can feel nebulous to people. And you said the goal is ultimately to increase the tax base. So I feel like, and that's really not either. It's me. That kind of stuck out to me, because I do feel like when it's nebulous now, that's the most simple answer. So it kind of feels like anything that fits into that might be something that Paid would help with or have a hand in or support. And so that was helpful. So thank you.
Mr. Heidel.
Just real quick, I guess on the good side with Pottstown Plaza, they have the Goodwill store, they have the grocery market bargain outlet. When are we going to reassess that property? I hold a grudge, and I want some money from them. I think they've underpaid for a while. How do we go about doing that?
So I would say that is up to both the solicitors. I wouldn't even begin to say that. I mean, I think it's up to your school district solicitor, and it's also up to the borough's solicitor. Certainly, I agree that they asked for a reassessment. They left the property empty for many years and they did not have tenants, and now they do have tenants. So I would say, yes, there have been improvements, and certainly the you know, how you go through that process is certainly up to the solicitors and the school board and the borough council. I would just like to make one clarification. And I'm not going to get into it with Ms. Spence, but some of her statements are not correct. So we don't have anything to do with the chamber other than we share office space. And secondly, yes, I did have a Pennsylvania real estate license. It is filed as inactive, and PAID does not get paid for helping. There are no fees for helping make an initial connection. What we get paid for is if they need further help and assistance in having us attend zoning hearing boards or set up meetings or have them get through the process. And any small business has been helped, and we continue to look for ways that we can help the very small businesses through our grants program. We're running a micro grant right now. So I just want to be clear about those few things, and there's several other things I could address. I'm not going to address them at this time, though.
Good. And with that, unless somebody has any other questions, we will thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
And now we'll move on to Mr. Willauer and Mrs. Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. I'm going to start off with a bid we received for a new weight room at the high school. And I'm going to share my screen here to go over some pictures. Okay, so these are some pictures of the current equipment that is in the weight room that we're looking to replace. A lot of the equipment presents some safety concerns and issues that would include equipment that is not matching. There's plates, bars, dumbbells, etc. that do not match current standards. There is bent and broken bars, dumbbells that are bent or broken, fractured benches, unbalanced benches just due to their age. A lot of them do not have modern safety latches, and most of the weights are also steel, which the current standards are to be rubber filled. And along with that, the floor is not level throughout the surface of the weight room. So the proposal we received was through Webster's Fitness, which is a well-known company for weight rooms and remodels in PA. This would be their layout of the new weight room, proper spacing according to standards. And this would be an example of some style of the equipment that we'll be putting in. Everything with the rubber filled weights, the benches that are adjustable, everything's has proper protection and coating on it to prevent rust and any concerns with chipping or issues on the equipment. And there's just a couple more pieces that would also be going in. And this is just one example of the flooring. It's a recycled rubberized flooring. Everything's level, everything matches, prevents any tripping or fall hazards for students that are actively using this space.
And may I ask, how much is this costing?
So the proposal is for $179,621, and that can be purchased with ESSER's funding.
And Mrs. Oakley, is this ESSER 1, 2, or 3?
So this is ESSER 3. Part of the ESSER fund has a set aside requirement for after school programming. We felt like this was a good space to address just in terms of usage. I know the football team alone uses this off season, Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays, from 3 to 7 during season, Monday through Thursdays, 3 to 4 hours a day. In the summer, they're in there twice a day, every day. Other teams that just the football team. I know there's other teams that also use this space. So that's why we targeted that, because of all the usage and the safety concerns. And I see Mr. Amato. I don't want to take over here, but I do see there's a question, Mr. Hill.
Well, I also have a question, and while you're asking your own question, Mr. Armato, you can probably answer this one. Do we have 1 or 2 weight rooms? Fitness rooms?
We have the area that Mr. Willauer and Ms. Oakley just described, which is by definition, I suppose, a weight room. That's down in the basement. Upstairs, there is the fitness center, which are 2 distinctly different things that use different types of equipment and are targeted at different groups of people.
Thank you. And you have a question?
Yeah, I think I have a whole bunch of questions and maybe some things to say. The area that is being described, if my memory serves me correctly, that area was cleaned, painted, renovated, and equipped, I would say almost entirely, 90% at least, by volunteer work and donations. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if Ms. Oakley's history.
I think that predates me, but it sounds accurate.
Oh, it definitely predates you. However, that basement, or what some kids used to refer to as the dungeon, is actually 3 different rooms, actually 4 different rooms. The one room is the room that you described. Adjacent to that is a smaller, much smaller room that has some cardiovascular equipment in it. And I'm wondering if there's any thought of that being renovated also, and equipment being updated in that room. Then on the other side of that area that you described, there is a office meeting area that I didn't hear any plans for anything of that area. And then the next room in that hallway, I believe, is essentially a small storage area, and I didn't hear anything regarding any of those areas. So that would be my first question. You alluded to the fact that essentially the only team that uses that room right now is the football team, both in and out of season. And I think that once we get this renovations done, that we could, at the building level, make a more concerted effort to make that available and encourage other teams to use it. I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe physical fitness classes use that area at all. They only use the fitness room on the next level of the building.
Yes, so the other areas that you mentioned, as far as addressing those, we did not include them in this kind of phase 1. The second thing that we do want to look at is any improvements to the air quality and possibly getting some dedicated outside air into that space. It's extremely difficult because of the way the roofing and not being able to run standard, HVAC equipment through like drop ceilings. So we are looking at that next before we look at retrofitting any of the other spaces down there. And I only said football because I had their schedule specifically just to give an idea of how often it actually is occupied.
Oh, it's occupied a lot. There's no question about it. I'm just suggesting that there's even more opportunity to utilize the room. Matter of fact, utilize all the rooms on that floor.
Is that it, Mr. Romano?
I think I've talked myself out. I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Okay. Ms. Spence?
Thank you. My question is the fitness room new? Is that a new facility? Because I feel as if a few years ago, it was either updated or considered brand new. Because I remember seeing a picture of Mr. Rodriguez in there, exercising. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct. So the fitness facilities upstairs and the weight rooms downstairs. So they're two different spaces, and the fitness was updated 3 years ago, post-COVID, with Pottstown Area Health and Wellness Foundation funds. And this is a proposed for the downstairs weight room through ESSER funds.
So, okay. And so my other question is there any way to bring the weight equipment upstairs to that facility instead of spending $100,000 on the upgrade of this one? So I feel that's a lot of money that can go towards getting our students up to level. We spend a lot of money on sports. We're not saying that it's not needed. It does, equipment looks really old and it does look unsafe. But is it a way to minimize the cost of the upgrade and bring it upstairs to something that was already redone and renovated?
So the space that's upstairs is appropriate for this equipment that's up there already. It's kind of maxed out. It's fully utilized as fitness space. So you wouldn't be able to bring that, that number of weight stations upstairs. If we did have space upstairs, we probably would have looked at that first, but there is no available space up there.
Is it any way to do it at a lower cost? $100,000 is a lot of money.
So, I mean, unless you wanted to start to limit, the number of stations that we were going to outfit, I mean, that would reduce your costs, but due to the number of stations that we are proposing equipment for, and then all new flooring, I mean, that's pretty similar to the cost that we paid for the upstairs fitness room as well.
Mrs. Spence, you might also benefit by knowing that when we did this a number of years ago, I was the principal at the time, which is why I remember. So when we did this a number of years ago, the option to have it on the same level, much like many of our other schools have, would have meant potentially building or taking space away, or some type of construction thing, which, as you're probably aware, as soon as you stick a shovel in the ground, it's $1 million. So, when we looked at all those things and said, well, wait a second, we, especially during that time period where we were counting every penny, which we still are, by the way, but you understand that we were very much in the underfunded stage. We looked around and said, what can we do for these kids? They cannot use the equipment in the fitness room to the same degree. They use a lot of weight racks, and I won't get into all of it because, quite frankly, I don't understand all of it, but they use different equipment to train. And part of that training is part of their safety regimen as they are playing. So I've had many impassioned coaches try and explain it to me. So what we did at the time was say, let's just utilize our space, and that's where all those donations came in. And we had, so I think it was Mr. Reinert, who has a painting company, and he donated the paint, and we came in there. So it's very much a bare bones operation. What this will do, I think, is just, it's not going to be the high level space, but it is going to be, it'll have some better equipment, because the equipment was, quite frankly, old when we put it down there. I hope that helps.
And does that 100,000 include the ventilation, or that's another number?
Oh, no, that does not include ventilation.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Bearden.
Thank you. In agreement, I do believe that the facility needs upgraded equipment, right? They're two separate areas. So I'm in agreement that the upgrades are needed for safety. My pause is that we are sharing the wealth of the ESSER funding across the board. For instance, the tennis courts tend to flood. And so I'd like to see some barriers there that prevent that item. That is male and female utilized. I don't know what we can do there, but again, I'm not saying that this facility doesn't need to be updated and the equipment updated. I'm just putting out there things for consideration. As well, the facilities for the locker rooms. I'm not sure what the status of those are. I've mentioned it for the girls for sure. I've not had the opportunity to walk through the male locker room, but I would like to see upgrades in the locker rooms, as well as uniforms for the young ladies, which I think our men at this point, our boys are receiving uniforms that they seem to have that fit. For the girls, it's not so much. So I don't know if it's just because I know we have some things in play, but again, if we have funding that's available, that those things aren't put off, that we can go ahead and spread the wealth around and do things in stages where each of the areas are being upgraded at some same veracity. And then I would like to see a Trojan uniform for females. And that's not looking to change our Trojan. There are male and females, unisex, if you will, for sure. But would like to see a female uniform, and that's just a piece that our young ladies need to see themselves in the same light. And that's not as pertinent, I guess, as a piece. Mr. Woodley has done an awesome job with Trojan men. But again, that's not to change. I love our Trojan mascot. And that does not change our Trojan mascot. Our Trojan is Trojan. We don't have to call it one thing or another except Trojan, but I would like to see a female uniform version. So just for consideration, those items that if we're looking at using ESSER funding, that we can consider those items as well.
Mr. Armato, I think you have put your hand up again.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you. So I was not anticipating this evening such a wide-ranging discussion about these items. However, now that we've opened up the jar, I feel compelled to jump in two different areas. One, cheerleading, which at the high school level and the middle school level have both experienced a large group of participants. The cheerleaders have been, for the best of my knowledge, forever kind of the lost children of the athletic department. At the end of the school day, when it comes time for them to practice, there is literally no place for them to practice that is safe. And on most days, unless it is unless we have somehow worked out a time schedule that allows them to get into the area where we have the wrestling mats and use that area. On most days during the winter season, those girls have to pack up the folding mats and either carry them by hand or cart them on a wheel down to the cafeteria, lay them out in what is what I would say very dangerous surface to practice on for cheerleaders to do stunts, and then fold them all back up again and either carry them by hand or cart them back up to the gymnasium area. Offhand, I'd say it's pretty close to pushing on at least pushing on a quarter of a mile distance that they're going to be carting those around. I just don't know that that's the best thing in the world to do. And, you know, not to use this platform, but now that we've opened up the door, I will. The wrestling team could use a dedicated space of its own also, because during the winter season, those practices have to end in time for the gymnasium to be set up for basketball games to be played. I think I said a lot more than I wanted to, so I apologize.
Okay, so the issue before us is $179,000 in ESSER funding to accept the bid. We put out request for proposals. We got a bid. The administration's recommending this bid. So the question is, was our committee okay with this particular bid to put it on the agenda for next week? Is there anyone who is on the committee who has an objection to that? Well, then let's move that onto the agenda for next month, for next week, excuse me. You have an objection, Mrs. Bearden?
I'm not going to state it as an objection to that particular area being upgraded. I've mentioned that I believe it needs to be upgraded. I certainly concur with the fact that cheerleaders have had to do this for years in both middle school and high school. I was a wrestling cheerleader for 2 years in high school, so I certainly completely agree with what Mr. Amato said. But I will also say I would like for us to take those other facilities and items to task, and that they not be waylaid. That the fact that we're considering doing this now, I don't want it to push back what is needed for those tennis courts. They get flooded out quite frequently. And facilities being upgraded for the locker rooms, that's an absolute necessity. So I'm saying I'm in agreement with the facility being upgraded. I just don't want us to push the other items off for any period of time.
Yeah, agreed 100. Yeah, agreed 100%. Agreed 100%. And perhaps what we would benefit from is, just like we put together a plan for facilities renovations of our buildings as they relate to the educational component of what we do, perhaps we should be doing that from the co-curricular perspective also. Agreed 100%.
Mr. Klein?
Mrs. Bearden and Mr. Armato just stole all my thunder, so I concur.
Okay. So I believe what we have done as a committee is we're recommending to go ahead and put this on the agenda for next week. Ms. Spence,
Can you put that on as a non-consent, please?
we will do that. Mrs. Oakley, I'm sure you'll note that. Mr. Willauer, if you would like to move on now to lead flushing update.
Okay, so involving our compliance with the Department of Education regarding lead in drinking water, our facilities department has been flushing lines on a weekly basis, which meets the current requirements set forth by the department. And on that line, we are also pursuing an environmental grant opportunity to update any remaining water fountains that during the COVID era were not updated to filtered water fountains or bottle fillers. We're going to look into installing more of them as well.
Great. Is there anyone who has anything else for Mr. Willauer? Well, then, thank you very much for joining our meeting. Is there anybody who has?
you.
anything? Thank you. And is there anybody has anything else? Then I will ask Ms. Oakley to move on to finance.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. So we have a number of contracts / agreements for your consideration for May. And the first one that I have is a renewal for CMD 24-25. And there is a 1.9% increase on the bus runs, 3% on administrative fees, 3.5% on the hourly rates, and the vehicle rental rates remain the same, so flat there. We also have a revenue contract for your consideration, which is through Market Street Sports, and this is for the grocery outlet. And they would like or have proposed to put signage up on the tennis courts. So the revenue stream would be $5,000 over 3 years. The next, I have a number of tech support and power school support services through the MCIU. There's 6 total contracts for those services, in addition to special education Vanguard School and another special education through Learnwell. So I'll pause after contracts because I suspect there might be questions or comments regarding those.
Ms. Spence?
Thank you. That $5,000 for the advertisement for the tennis court, is that $5,000 per year or $5,000 after 3 years?
5,000 each year for 3 years. So a total of 15,000 in revenue.
Okay.
Mr. Heidel?
Maureen, please make the CMD contract non-consent.
I will.
Mr. Armato?
Yes, thank you. The Market Street Sports organization, which goes out and tries to find advertising for us, that's $5,000 a year for 3 years. However, they do take out their percentage for the work that they have done to find an advertiser, a sponsor, and they are responsible for developing the actual advertising. Like in this case, it'll be some type of windscreen. They pay for the windscreen. They pay for the maintenance of this windscreen throughout the duration of the contract.
Did you put your hand up again, Ms. Spence?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Ms. Spence.
Are we still not able to see the contracts until after, until a few days before the meeting, the general meeting? Or is it possible to see the contracts or review the contracts before the general meeting and not only a few days before? And my other question, I'm sorry, I'm gonna forget if I let you answer that one. My other question is the $5,000 that we get is minus the commission of the organization that's finding the advertiser, or we're getting 5,000 net and whatever they get is on top of that? Because if we're not getting net, then how much are we getting?
Do you want me to try to answer some of those questions?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the contract is $5,000 a year. Then Market Street subtracts 30% of that $5,000 as their fee. And the proposal, because first they have to get recognition from us that we're willing to have them make the proposal, and then the company who is looking to become a sponsor, then they still have the right to accept or reject it. And I do believe that I have the the proposal. I believe I sent it. I'm not trying to remember who I sent it to, but we have a proposal.
So we're down to just a little bit more than 10 minutes, and we have the biggest item of the year coming up, which is the budget. So, Ms. Oakley, I'm going to ask you to move on and talk to us about Homestead Farmstead. Do we know how much money we're going to have?
We do. We do. So if it's okay with you, I think I'll cover the next few items with the budget, and I'll begin to share that so we can walk through where we stand.
Please do.
As board members may recall, they, hang on, just bear with me. Okay, I believe you can see budget at this point. We did approve our preliminary budget last month, back in April. And we are up for final budget adoption at this point in time. So just a recap of where our certified tax duplicate is, and remembering that we kept all programmatic additions that we added post-COVID. That includes counselors, virtual coaches, middle school house model, all of those things we kept in place. We also have $800,000 in for property tax rebate program, which we'll discuss our options and maybe come to a conclusion of which avenue we would like to put together our resolution for our tax rebate. And we have conservatively budgeted our state revenues at 50% of the governor's proposal. And this budget assumes a 0% tax increase to our millage. So looking at the governor's proposal for basic ed subsidy, it's about $23.5 million, and we've included in this budget $21.5 million. So just to break down, salaries and benefits is by far the largest line item in our budget, and that's followed by transportation and tuition, followed by professional services, and then supplies and pass-through funds, which are our pre-K counts pass-through funds, and our bond debt service. So back in March, we were looking at a shortfall of about $128,000. We were able to reduce that down to $37,000 and balance that budget with the use of fund balance. And that is still where our final budget numbers, as far as revenues and expenses, have remained the same since our preliminary budget last month. So just a reminder to board members, we've not increased our millage in the past 4 budget cycles. And just to give kind of a picture, we all know Act 1 is a lot more than 2.5%. And for us, and our adjusted index has been in the range of 5 to even 7%, which would be the allowable rate that we could raise our taxes. And we have chosen not to raise our taxes. So even if we did incrementally increase small 2.5% in terms of Act 1, we would be looking at a much larger millage assessment. We've not done that, so just want to give a little recognition as to where we stand and where we have stood for the past few years. And even if we were to take incremental increases, we would still be extremely high in comparison to the county and the state, but we were able to hold that line over the past few budget cycles. So our homestead and farmstead, this rebate will be one of the resolutions that need to be passed by the board this month. And the allocation that we've received from the state has been increased by about $400,000. And that funding must be passed through to our homesteads and farmsteads. Pottstown doesn't have any farmsteads, so we pass it through to all of our approved homesteads. And the county has 3,664 homesteads for Pottstown for the 2024 tax year. So that would mean we'd be passing through a credit of $670.55 on each approved homestead assessment. So that reduces the assessed value by $15,980. So as you can see, that's significantly increased from last year, almost $110 over last year's allocations. So those funds are required to be passed through, and we will do that by form of resolution. So moving along to our $800,000 that we have included in the budget, we talked about some options for how we would like to, provide relief for our taxpayers. And one of the ideas that we've been talking about for a few months now is piggybacking off of the PA property tax rent and rebate program. And this program is already established at the state level, the application process, and they would do all of the vetting to make sure all the criterias are matched for each applicant. And then the applicant would then take their proof of their state tax rent rebate program documentation, provide that to the school district, and then we could in turn issue our own rebate. So there are a few changes to the program this year. So when we look at projecting how much or how many eligible people would qualify, it does become a little challenging because the income in prior years, the state only rebated up to $35,000 of income, and they've moved that threshold up to $45,000 of income. So we are going to have a new pool of qualified applicants that we just don't have any historical count on, because that's new program changes this year from the state. So if we are to look at, say, piggybacking off of this program, I would make sure we leave a little bit of room of contingency in there for all of those new qualified, applicants up to that $45,000 threshold. Additionally, the state did increase the maximum rebate amount as well. So the maximum rebate is at the lowest income level tier, it's $1,000. And the criteria is 65 and older, widow or widowers 50 and older, or people with disabilities 18 and older. And the income thresholds, as you can see them on the screen. But this rebate program applies to homeowners and renters. So I think that's why we have continued to keep this on, our radar as an option, because we wanted to include all different classes of our community. So again, just noting the maximum increase up to $1,000 of rebate. The income requirement has been raised from 35,000 to 45,000. And just to keep in mind that our Pottstown median household income 2022 was a little over 57,000. So this is the data that was provided, and this is actually from the numbers that you can see on the left-hand side here. These are actual rebates that the state processed, and these figures came from the 2021 tax year. So these were processed in 2022 and even through a little bit of 2023, and this report is as current as July of 2023. So you can see that there is quite a bit of lag period in the state data, and the number of applicants that we're looking at are from the 2021 tax year. So we don't have 2022 reports out yet, and we would be looking at the applicant pool for 2023. So I look back a few years and the numbers remain pretty steady. So 909 was the total number of rebates that the state issued. And as you can see, they issued 376 for the lowest income tier, 257 for the second tier, 42 at the third tier, 234 rebates at the fourth tier. And then that fifth tier is unknown because they've never issued rebates for that income category, but they will be doing so this year. So that's the planning piece that I'm talking about when we say we need to build in something for that unknown. And in this case, I estimated 300 just so that we could look at in terms of dollars what that would look like. So if we were to assume that there would be 300 qualified applicants up to that $45,000 level, the new maximum rebate amounts, and then there's the total rebates that I would assume that could come through as on Pottstown's program. Additionally, there's a supplemental rebate that is offered, and that's offered to anyone in this qualifying applicant pool who pays 15% of their income towards their property tax. So they get a little bit additional if 15% of their income is used towards their property taxes. So if we were to move forward with this program, the recommendation would be to take the base amount plus the supplements, and then we would rebate a percentage of that. So for purposes of looking at our $800,000 and where we would want to be, the column all the way to the right shows what our rebates could be at 75%. Then we would add those estimated supplements in, and we'd be sitting at about $682,000 if we chose to rebate, piggyback off the state at 75% of the state's rebate. I know we have $800,000 in the mix to provide for tax relief, and we can discuss more if we want to move forward with the 70%, 75%, or a different number that the board wishes or feels comfortable with moving forward. The other, oh, sorry, this I must have put those slides before this one. This is our fund balance. So this is just the historical as of our audit last year, 22-23. We are sitting unassigned fund balance $6.3 million and total of all funds $27.7 million. So again, just to recap, our 0% tax increase, where our revenues and our expenditures are, and we would use the fund balance to fund the shortfall. And then I'm going to go back to the tax relief because these were the outstanding items that I wanted to discuss with the board tonight as far as issuing a resolution if we decide we want to piggyback off the state program. And again, this is just some information. If we were to do the 75%, these would be the rebate figures that the Pottstown applicants would be eligible for, anywhere from $285 to $750. And then this is just some more language regarding the state's program. The applications for 2023 are due by June 30, 2024 to the state. So then that would they start issuing rebates in July, and then they would be able to in turn get their check from the state, send it to the school district, and they would have till June 30, 2025 to take advantage of our program. The other option that we explored last year was the additional tax exemption. And we gave this exemption just a flat dollar amount to all taxpayers as a one-time tax credit reduction in the assessed value. And we printed that directly on the bills. This is a sample of what the bill looked like. Sorry, I wanted to black out the name and address on there. But as you can see, the language is on there, 2023 tax relief reduction, one time, and that shows the assessed value reduction. And then the bottom box shows the $88.79 reduction in the tax bill. On the back of the tax bill, there's your notice for the homestead tax relief, which is standard. We added the language for the notice of the additional 2023 property tax relief. And then it just explains the exclusion is provided by the Pottstown School District Board of Directors, and it will reduce your 2023 property taxes as noted. So I know last month, we did talk about what that looks like and what kind of language we are able to put on the tax bill. This is what we did last year, so that again is an option for board members. I'm going to pause and I'm happy to reshare the screen, but I think we can have better discussion if we are in a group format.
Mrs. Oakley, if you want to put that last one back up again.
Sure. Is this the one?
Yeah, Mr. Heidel made the point last month that I think he's right. Most people just look at the number, what's my tax? And they don't really spend a lot of time figuring out what all these amounts are. I'm just making an observation. So the observation is the last thing on this chart is the tax amount. That's the tax amount. That's what's on the front of their tax bill saying, this is what you need to pay. So whether or not we reduce the millage or whether we not give a rebate, it's still going to be, when they look at it, this is the dollar amount I have to pay. So I just wanted to make that observation. So I went and looked at my own tax bill and I thought, how many people go into the detail of whether it was a homestead or whether it was a tax rebate they got from the state or from us? It's just, what's the dollar amount? So having made that incredibly valuable observation for it, I will now look for Mrs. Johnson.
All right, my thoughts. I agree. There's going to be people who are going to look at it and be like, my taxes went up from last year. That totally, absolutely could happen. And it will happen for some people. But I don't think that's nobody is suggesting we make the decision based on that, but I don't think we should make the decision based on that. If that was any level of thought, was that public perception side. I think we can talk about the fact that we are doing tax relief a different way this year, and here's what it is. A lot of that will come through, how we present it, and the rest of the chips will fall where they may. I think what my preference would be is that we go all in on the property tax and rent rebate part and do the 75%. And my reason for that, because I was thinking about which of the options I'd prefer. My reason for the property tax and rent rebate is that I see this as being a program we can have long-term. A lot of school districts have this. They've done it with some success. I think that it's really valuable for our community when we've got not only a lot of folks who are low income, but a lot of folks who are on a fixed low income. And this is a program that meets a lot of those needs. And then what I would hope to see in future years as we get increased fair funding is an actual discussion about how much we can responsibly reduce some kind of tax, whether that be our millage or some other option. I don't think that's this year. I don't feel like we've got enough fair funding to make it anything that would be a permanent decision, but I still want to go there. I just feel like this is a good interim thing where we can set aside money for this program, hopefully establish this program, and then see what else we can chip away at in future years. Whereas I feel like a tax credit that we just put on the bill was always kind of like a stopgap, like, well, here's what we can do this year until we figure it out. I'd like to start building and doing stuff I think can be a permanent direction we can go in.
Ms. Spence.
Thank you. So my question is, I got the sense from your presentation, Mrs. Oakley, there's an unknown with that 35 to 45K income bracket. It could be maybe higher than the 376 between the 0 to 8,000, which I think a lot of people are right there at, the edge of, and that's why they struggle so much, because you're really not that poor to receive a lot of assistance, but you're also not wealthy to be able to afford a tax increase or anything like that. So it will benefit. I think that's why the state increased that amount, because it'll benefit a lot of people. But I think there's a lot of people in that bracket. So I think from your presentation, you're saying that maybe we don't want to give the whole 800,000 to another program, to another rebate, and because the unknown of that number, or did I just not understand your presentation?
No, you understood it and you're right there. So the unknown, I estimated 300 people would qualify in that range, but like you said, I too think that there are a lot more people. So if we go in at the 75% rate, the all-in reimbursement is it was 600,000 and some change. So that would give us between the 600 and 1,000, it'd give us that bubble between 600 and 800, you know, to capture all of those other people who it could be 500, and then we'd still be in okay. We wouldn't be extending that $800,000. So that's exactly what I was referring to, is that unknown and giving a little bit of wiggle room so that we don't overextend ourselves beyond the 800,000.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Mr. Heidel,
Just to piggyback on that, my concern, how many years has the program been run by the state, Maureen?
I mean, from what I was looking at today, I mean, it's definitely pre-2006. It's been going on. I mean, it's part of Act 1 is kind of looped into that program. I believe the funding comes from gaming revenue. It's been going on a long time. They've just now started to increase the rebate amounts and then the income. They haven't adjusted for inflation for like a number of years.
Okay, so I was going to say the drum seems to be beating on social media and in the media as well too. So yeah, I'm a little hesitant at 75%, and just to make sure, if we had 700 new people and we go above 800,000, we're on the hook for anything above that 800,000 because we promised that rebate at that percent.
We
Correct?
would be, yes.
Okay.
But that it is the lowest rebated amount, so it's not, it's not the $1,000. You wouldn't be 75% of the $1,000. It's 75% of, I think, $380. So
But I'm looking more. I'm looking more upon the number of people who will apply
yes,
than I am. I'm not worried so much about the extended money. I'm not worried about the bigger rebate. I'm worried about the number of people that will be applying this year.
agreed.
Is my concern.
Mr. Klein,
So how about if we shift it and we say we have the $800,000, the percent will be determined by the number of people in the pool. So that maybe it ends up to be 78% or 72% or whatever it is.
I don't think that we could pass the resolution with those terms. I reached out to legal counsel to talk about if we could cap, like Kurt said, so the first 1,000 people that eat up the $800,000 and then kind of shut it off. And was not really allowable under, the way that we would have to present the program and put the resolution together. We can't then limit the pool. So I could ask about a variable amount, but I don't think that is going to work as far as passing that.
One other thing, Maureen, too, I could show up on June 30th, 2024 with my rebate and say, give me my check for 2024. I could come in on July 2nd, or I could come in on June 30th. So you don't know how much money's coming out of that pocket. Someone could show up the last day of the year and say, here's my rebate check from the state, give me my money. I waited all year. I left it in my closet. Right?
Yeah, I would leave, unless you decide that you want to cut it off at a certain date, that may be allowable, but I would think the state starts issuing their rebates July 1. I'd give people, it's really no issue for us because, we're cutting checks. Our fiscal year doesn't end until June 30th. So.
Right. But we couldn't tell our exact number until June 30th.
Correct. We wouldn't know for the subsequent year's budget. I would think that most people would bring their application, as soon as they get the state one, but there's always that chance that they could all wait till June 29th, June 30th and hand it in.
I'll just make the observation that if we go over $800,000, it's not the end of the world. We do have a $27 million surplus. With that, I will go to Mr. Armato and then Mrs. Johnson.
Okay, I think I'm gonna not comment now. I wasn't understanding something, but now I think I do. Thank you.
Mrs. Johnson,
I was just gonna say, among other things, what you just said, Mr. Hilton, that we have a healthy fund balance, and that itself doesn't worry me because we can always reset it another year if it's really out of balance. And also just to reaffirm, these things trickle in over a good amount of time. So figuring out the total amount of people and working back from there does not work.
well, as a longtime chairman of the Finance Committee, I can say with certainty that I really don't quite understand how this works, but Maureen does, so that's the important thing. And as I told Mrs. Johnson on an aside earlier this week, since she's put so much effort into this and since she's been jumping up and down for as much as anybody for fair funding and so forth, I'm okay with her proposal. So, and I really don't want to, we could spend an hour going around and around. Are the other members of the Finance Committee comfortable with the proposal that Mrs. Johnson has made about how to give the money back? Looks like we are, so let's go ahead and do that next week.
Okay, so we'll put the resolution for the 75% of the state's rebate as part of the final budget adoption.
Of course, with the caveat that Mrs. Johnson agrees to be the treasurer again for another term.
And that
Is that
is
part
the
of,
next,
is that part of our agenda?
That's
it is
fine.
the next
Right
item.
there, I
Yes, it
see
is.
on the agenda.
I am willing. I'll just say that I'm willing if you guys think I'm the right one for the job.
Okay, well, that item is taken care of, so. Now we'll move to furniture bid award ESSER funded.
Okay,
which
so
we
I'm
heard
going
about last week.
to share my
This is
screen.
Also
Yes.
ESSER 3.
Yes, this is also ESSER 3. So I did note the other items that, board members have discussed regarding, ESSER funding. Just bear with me. I can never get this to the first slide when I need it to. Sorry. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our furniture bid award, and that would also be ESSER funded, as well as an update on the turf field study, figures and timeline. So first we'll discuss the furniture bid award. So we put together a bid package and we included the high school, some middle school furniture and some replacement furniture for Lincoln Elementary. So at the high school, the furniture is to support the lunch and learn program. Most of this furniture would be placed in the hallway and the cafeteria. And Mr. Rodriguez gave a very detailed explanation of that program. So if you want to jump in and add any commentary as far as this schematics of what I'm showing, please feel free. So these are just extra dining spaces and lounging spaces in the hallways near the locker. There's also some down near the athletic facility in case students want to go utilize their lunch and learn period down near and utilize the gym space. I believe that's available for them. Some more hallway schematics. And then moving over to the middle school. So the middle school has always, since 5th grade, moved up there. They've been in a pinch for additional seating for some of their breakout groups and mentor meetings. They've done a lot to build positive behavior, building culture, and they're really lacking some seating areas. So we included some additional seating areas, as you can see, for the middle school space, utilizing some of the space, like this is, I believe, underneath one of the, or in one of the stairwell areas. And then lastly, we have some replacement furniture at Lincoln, and we have some really old flip top desks and cracked chairs, and there's been a lot of pinching in with the chairs and the desks because due to the age and safety concerns. So the total package for all three buildings is $307,000, and this would be ESSER funded. We are looking to utilize some of our ESSER funding at this point. As board members know, we are coming to kind of the tail end of this ESSER funding, and we have allotted for a lot of supports, mental health supports, the middle school house model, all of these things. Additionally, the past 2 years, we have gotten increased allocations from the state for our Ready to Learn funds. These allocations came in extremely late. We had planned to use a lot of ESSER funds for a lot of these mental health supports. We had to shift and spend Ready to Learn funds on these mental health supports, so it did free up some of this ESSER money. So as I walk you through the next item on the agenda, I'll kind of explain why we're looking at about a $4 million allocation of ESSER funds that we need to plan use for. And this is blurry, so I apologize. We did get the geographic survey studies back from the turf fields, and they were able to put together some updated costs for estimates regarding the 3 fields, the two turf fields, and then Franklin Street Field, putting a softball, converting that into a softball infield areas for dedicated for softball on Franklin Street. As you know, that's our most heavily used grass field at this point in time. And the options that we were looking at to potentially put turf in were the high school where the current softball field is, and making that a multi-purpose field that would be able to be lined for softball, soccer, pretty much any sports that you would be able to play on turf field. The second area that we were looking at is outside the high school cafeteria, which we have currently. It is primarily utilized by different sports for practice. I believe the regulation size of that field does not allow for a lot of gameplay. The band uses that field for practice as well. And then Franklin Street, which is primarily used for everything at this point. But if we were able to convert that into a softball field, that would give us a second softball field. Currently, we don't have a second softball field, so we have to rent that space or utilize that space from the borough when it's available. And the reason why I'm bringing this to the board members tonight is because I want to talk about the timeline. If we are wanting to seriously potentially consider this project, and if we are wanting to use any of ESSER funding towards this project, we're going to need to make some decisions to move forward with the next phase of the contract, which is the formal sketch plans within the next few months. The late liquidation period for ESSER would allow us to spend these funds through March 2026. But they do have circumstances that are outlined, and primarily it's for capital contracts and projects of this sort that take, 1+ years to come to, full construction. So I'm gonna stop.
May I jump in and ask, how much of ESSER 3, which you have here, we've got to oblige the money by the end of September of this year? How much of ESSER 3 is uncommitted at this point?
About $4 million.
So we have $4 million. We've got to decide where to spend it by the 30th of September.
Correct.
Thank you. Ms. Spence,
Thank you. My question is not about this proposal. And anyone on the board can answer this. You've all been on the board longer than me, but how come Rupert Elementary schoolyard, play yard doesn't have a enclosed, fence? The ball is always running into the road. There's at least once or twice a month a ball in my front yard. And I am really afraid that one kid is gonna chase the ball right into the street and a really bad accident is gonna occur. It's really just open space right there, and they play right abut next to the sidewalk. So does anyone have an answer why that's not closed in with a fence?
I'm not aware of any elementary school that has a fence around any area that I know of. Is there? Mr. Rodriguez, do we have any elementary schools that have fences up?
Franklin does.
Franklin has a fence?
Yeah, I think in parts for sure,
Yes, it does.
because we use it as a field. But Barth does not and Lincoln does not.
Yeah, but Bart, they're not playing right at the road.
Or do you mean at the bottom of the hill or the top of the hill?
As far as Rupert,
Yeah.
like right in front of the school, they play right in front of the school.
Okay.
You know, where the school building is here and then the park is to the side. They don't play in that park. They play right in the field. They play kickball.
Got it.
So it's like in the middle of the block. And then there's a hill, so the ball rolls down.
We can
Mr.
look into it. It could be permitting too, though.
Mr. Hilton, I think Mr. Heidel has had his hand up.
I said, Mr. Heidel.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not hear you. I was gonna say in regards to Rupert, one thing I've always been worried about is the drainage area behind the basketball courts. There's a fence along the court, but behind that you have some very large rocks in a drainage area that kind of goes an L shape down and around that court. I hope no one's been hurt on it, but I've always been concerned about that.
Well, as I live and breathe, I just gone on Google Earth and discovered that there's a fence there at Franklin that somehow in 50 years, I've missed that it's there. Well, I guess I can't say a fence would be really obtrusive. Mrs. Johnson,
Are we looking to have a conversation about the fields proposal? Is that kind of where we're at? I feel like a little like, if there a question hanging out there?
So the first question is everybody okay with the bid award for the furniture?
I am.
Okay, now the second question
that's
is,
not part of the 4 million, correct? Or is it?
no. But
So
I had to count it.
after all this furniture that we're gonna buy, we still have $40 million left over.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Mrs. Johnson.
So we're talking about the fields. Okay, so I'll just say, looking at the fields and coming off of, everybody speaks from their experience, coming off of a softball season with my 2 middle school girls and being so reminded about the inequities in terms of our sports facilities, certainly as it relates to softball, where we only have one softball field for both middle and high school to share, as well as the quality of the field and of the auxiliary field. I do feel like we need to move forward with addressing that issue. So I am not one to I'm not super granular when it comes to all of the facilities and fields and all of the nitty gritty there. But looking big picture at it, I think it's, you know, time that we do something, and supportive of moving forward on particularly having 2 softball fields. That part to me is what stands out as finally. Thank you so much.
Mr. Heidel.
Yeah, if you could, Lauren, if you could bring up that page again, like the spreadsheet of what each, yeah, right to there. So then if we were to look at, what is it, A, B, and C, what is our total at A, B, and C?
A, B, and
Which is
C.
basically
Yeah,
being the fields.
the field's 8,031,000.
Okay, so we're looking at about 8 million, and 4 million of which we use ESSER funds for. So 4 million is going to come out of capital projects. The other things that we would love to do right now isn't as time constraint as A, B, and C, correct?
No, but I think the tennis, I mean, that was on the list also. I mean, it's on the
Right.
list.
Oh, I'm not saying we don't want it
Yeah.
done, but if we were saying we need to commit something by September, we can say, yes, here are our plans, here's a commitment for A, B, and C, and then we can budget out D through G. But with the time constraints we have and the
Correct.
project trying to get those 3 things done, we're looking at 6.5 months and 4 million of ESSER, 4 million from capital, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Mrs. Bearden.
So sorry, but we've performed patchworks. We've done different things to different fields. I waved my white flag for several years about our lacrosse and field hockey fields. I asked for a structure for the girls softball, and that I love that the girls softball has that coverage, and that we've done some work on the lacrosse and field hockey fields, soccer fields. But it's still choppy, right? So those are still issues. But our tennis courts don't have a secondary fallback. We are able to perform on our current fields, at least. On our tennis courts, they're flooded. There's no practice. There aren't matches. There's no backup to the tennis courts. So each and every time we talk about facilities, what keeps going backwards are the locker rooms and the tennis courts. So in the grand scheme of things, before we begin putting more equity and prioritizing over those areas, they're never getting touched. So our locker rooms need to be addressed as a priority A, and our tennis courts need to be a priority A because they don't have backups. We currently are able to perform on the others. Agree with the lacrosse, and which I didn't see mentioned, probably because it's maybe considered fixed. It's not, but the lacrosse and the field hockey fields, as well as the soccer fields, which are used in some, scheduling capacity. But then softball would kind of come in after that, in my opinion, because we have a softball field. Tennis courts, we don't have a backup there. So if we're prioritizing, I don't think we should prioritize turf over having an actual tennis court or locker room. That's just my opinion. Those items are pushed back, and I don't want to beat that, but if you look back, I haven't seen much done in those areas.
Okay, let me just jump in here. Nobody can accuse me of being super vigilant about what's going on in the school district. But having just had this for the first time, knowing that we have $4 million we have to spend or have to commit by September 30th, and seeing this turf fields project costs, I'm assuming, Mr. Rodriguez, that the administration, which is basically you, is deciding that we should spend $4 million on field projects. Is that right? That's your recommendation, because this is what you're putting up and telling us, oh, we got $4 million we have to spend by September 30th. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, so.
I think we
this
should
is-
do it all, just officially speaking, but yes.
So what Mrs. Bearden is asking you for, considering everything else, is chump change. If it's $257,000 against 4 million. So why don't you, Mr. Rodriguez, you jump in here, why don't you be prepared for our next meeting to come up with the magic $4 million and what we're going to put in that $4 million that you want to spend on our fields. Okay?
If the board is in agreement, and Mrs. Oakley and I will do it, no problem at all. Mrs. Oakley, can we have something together by the board meeting for consideration?
For
Which
next week,
meeting we talking
no.
about?
I think Mr. Hilton said next month.
Are you talking next month or next week? Because I want to make
No,
sure.
next month.
Next month, huh,
Yeah.
no problem. I thought you were squeezing me there for.
No, next month.
Next
Okay,
month was fine. Yep.
right. Okay, I got my bid in. Mrs. Johnson,
I think, each one of us is aware of the different needs that we're seeing because we're each coming from different perspectives. Just wanting to throw out with softball, part of why I'm pretty passionate about this is when that field also gets flooded and has caused real problems in terms of being able to use and this kind of the same with the backup. It obviously is, if we're doing turf, a much bigger lift financially. So I certainly recognize that, but just in terms of that idea of there being a backup, that field is out of commission all too quickly because of drainage type of issues, as well as just because there's multiple teams that need to use the same field. But I'm not personally so concerned about like which thing is first on the list, because I do agree we should just be doing it all. And since we're throwing that out there, I also would love to see us do that bathrooms piece that is in there, because I think that will make our facilities so much more usable, so much more friendly to people in the community and our families. And that's all I got to say about that.
Mr. Heidel,
Yeah, I just wanted to say, back to the only reason I said 4 million and 4 million was the deadline. To me, spend the 10-2, do everything. I'm totally behind that. We walked through, we talked about it. I'm for it. Spend the whole money. Do it now. We have the funds. Do it now.
Mrs. Bearden,
Thank you. So my comments were not in relation to separating anything out and saying we should not do the others. I'm in full agreement that we should do all of them, including the bathrooms, which was another item that we posed for other times. But what I was saying for consideration was prioritizing and making sure that we do have those items prioritized that have not been touched. I am aware that softball, because I've walked all of the fields, even though my daughter doesn't necessarily use them. I'd love for her to be playing softball and lacrosse, which was my love, but she's not doing that. But it's just that we need to prioritize where I love it all going into the budget, but if we don't have locker rooms in there, we don't know what that will look like as far as the cost. If we're looking at a $4 million bucket, someone can walk in there and say the locker rooms alone on the inside could be quite more expensive than we would intend. So I'm all for us doing all of it, absolutely, not separating it out, but prioritizing so that if we run into a scenario where we don't have as much money or a contract costs more money to complete, that we have those items taken care of that have been waiting for quite some time, like the locker rooms, And yes, the fields the softball fields, they definitely flood right along the same area as the tennis courts. But at least we have those items done before we move on to the bonus, I would say bonus items that we could afford to maybe put off for another year or another process.
Mr. Armato.
Thank you. As long as we're gonna eat into Mrs. Johnson's time for the next committee meeting, then we ought to go full tilt. I am in favor of, I believe, what you were originally suggested, Mr. Hilton, and that is we have the $4 million to start us off. We have the reserve funds. Mr. Rodriguez, bring us back the game plan that says this is what it looks like when we address all the issues. And we go from there. If there's a time to do it, now's the time to do it.
Okay. With that, I believe the finance portion is over. I asked Mrs. Johnson back in February, I asked Mrs. Johnson to explain to me the fair funding scenario. And it occurred to me it would be helpful for us all to hear it, since Mrs. Johnson is working for Representative Friel, and she has, say, more knowledge than anybody else of the administration. She's better equipped to talk about that. So I'm going to turn that over now to Mrs. Johnson and ask her to move forward.
Well, I do not know that I have more knowledge than anybody at the administration, but on this particular little piece, I would be happy to share. Let me just screen share, and I will try to make it quick. Just confirming everyone can see that. Right? Yeah, okay.
Mrs. excuse me, Mrs.
Yeah.
Johnson. Oh, you're doing it exactly. I was going to say if you can blow it up. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes. Okay, so the request, from what I understood from Mr. Hilton, was, hey, talk to us about fair funding, what we can expect, what's proposed. That kind of just loosely stated. So Mr. Hilton sent me a little sheet. I adjusted it a little bit just with the numbers that I had. At the top, you'll see the budget. I haven't actually touched those numbers, so just left them as he put them in there. The budget and the total fund balance. And then what I'm speaking to a little bit is just the proposed state fair funding boost. And just to recap, we had this huge court case. The Commonwealth Court said, hey, legislature, governor, you're not funding schools properly, fix it. Then the Basic Education Funding Commission met, took about 7-8 months or so to go over what is adequate school funding look like? What does it look like to live up to the constitutional mandate that the state has to properly fund schools? Okay, so they came back with a couple plans, and they passed one of those plans. It's called the Majority Report, and it calls for a lot more funding. And that funding was split in a couple different ways. Some of it driven, it's the adequacy funding. I will get into actually explaining the sheet a little bit more in detail, but the adequacy funding is directed towards districts that their student spending is too low to provide their students with a education that is up to par in terms of getting the results they need. They got to that number, for what it's worth, by looking at the districts that were performing well and seeing what they're spending on their students. And that's how they kind of felt that out. Like, who's succeeding in terms of test scores and outcomes, graduation? What are they doing? What's their how much money are they spending? Let's use that to work back from there to see what other schools should be spending. The other piece they looked at was tax equity. They said, what districts are overtaxing their taxpayers in order to come up with the funding that the state is not giving them. So there's money in that proposed plan for tax equity, and there's money in that proposed plan for adequacy. Okay, so that's kind of all backstory. We arrive at this budget. The governor makes his proposal. He builds on that Basic Education Funding Commission plan, and he sketches it out over 7 years like the plan did, and said, okay, let's do the first year of what the Basic Education Funding Commission proposed. In that first year, so now we're here at the governor's budget proposal line, he proposed an increase that would give Pottstown about $4 million extra a year. Okay, we budgeted off of half of that, right, Mrs. Oakley? Okay, we are assuming in our budget that half of that will come through. Because even though the Basic Education Funding Commission gave a plan, it doesn't mean that that's what the legislature and the governor are going to do. And the court didn't say exactly how much money would need to be spent and how. So there's nothing setting this in stone that this is how it has to be. But that's what the governor proposed, that the increase for this year would be $4 million. The next two lines where it says adequacy funding and tax equity funding, those total amounts there to the right, 8.8 million and 13.7 million. Those are the, after we do a 7-year phase in, here's how much extra you'd be getting a year. We'd be getting, 8.8 million for adequacy, and we'd be getting 13.7 for the tax equity piece. That's after the phase in. That's not this year. Again, all proposed. I took some of my words proposed out of my little chart here, but I kept putting it in because I want so bad for everybody to understand there is nothing about this that is set in stone. It is all proposed, including this year. It is not been voted on. And it will be negotiated year after year after year. It's not like once we get through this budget, then we'll know. We will continue to not know and have to slog it out every single year, advocating to get as much of this as we can. Especially with the political realities, what they are now. So I'll just leave that at that. Okay, so then you got over the last line, total proposed increase after the 7-year phase in. Again, 7-year phase in of what the Basic Ed Funding Commission proposed, like almost assuming that each governor and legislature would actually follow through on building on that. We would end up with approximately 28 million more in 7 years every year. So that's a lot of money. If that would happen, even the small amount of money we've gotten has been really important and impactful for us, for our students, but this would be huge. But it's a proposal. Some of that money is for the tax equity, some of it is for the adequacy, and some of it is just for general basic education funding that goes through the formula to every single district. Whereas the other two portions are more directed at certain districts. So, Mr. Hilton, does that share what you were hoping I'd share, or are there questions unanswered?
That's exactly what I was hoping you'd do. Thank you so much for following the script that I sent you. Just kidding.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Mr. Hilton.
But it's the big picture. I mean, what's coming down the pike?
Yeah, and that is hopefully the big picture. Hopefully, that'd be great. That'd be great. But I think that it's definitely wise to be knowing that that's the big picture. Isn't it? It's the plan from some, but it's not the plan from everyone. And even and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more in my committee a little bit, but we already have stuff with this round of things where vouchers are being proposed, and general cries of we can't afford this are happening. So it is all up in the air right now anyway, which isn't to say that I think we'll get like no increase. We will get an increase, but it's all up in the air.
Well, thank you very much. When I first talked to you, I found that very enlightening. Considering that we've almost used twice as much time as we've been allotted, I'm going to arbitrarily adjourn this meeting so that Mrs. Johnson's committee can begin. Meeting adjourned.
Okay, so to start my meeting, if there's any public comments, either from the end of finance and facilities or the beginning of the public relations and community engagement. Now is the time.
Not at this time, Ms. Johnson.
Okay. Let me just look at the agenda. We have no guest presenters tonight, which is very lucky for whatever unfortunate soul would have had to sit through a extra long finance and facilities meeting, interesting though it was. I'm going to start out with a little slideshow. As we've been doing, we've been kind of recapping some of the things that have been on social media in the district and just going on in the district generally. Let me just get ready to screen share again. And I will do my best to be quick about this. Okay. Okay, so first, I noticed acceptance day just happened. And I don't know if there's a better word for it. It's college acceptance, but I also noticed it's not just college, it's military, it's probably career and other options that our students have for their post-secondary lives, postgraduate lives. Oh, and I thought, oh, okay. Sorry, just having a little tech problem there. A little more from that. Looks like there was some fun that went along with that day. A rock wall, and I saw some like safe archery and basketball. All right, we had our high school music and arts night. So here are some pictures from arts. I love this. I love this so much. I've always loved arts nights ever since we started, and our kids are at Lincoln, and we go through Lincoln, and it was just amazing. Here are some pictures that were posted of both the high school music as well as middle school. Lots going on there. The indoor color guard was amazing. Unified track. John, if you feel like jumping in, feel free. I know you want to. No?
I don't want to take any more time.
Okay, if I'm missing anything or you got a comment, you've taken most of these pictures. I know I took a few, Mr. Rodriguez took a few, and probably a few others, but you do a whole lot of this documentation. I always feel like you should probably be giving the presentation yourself, but happy to do it. Just feel free. I grabbed some photos. All of our elementary schools have Facebook pages and post various things going on, you know, creative projects, learning. It looks like they're studying soil there, Legos projects, teacher administrative assistant appreciation days, petting zoo, just kids having a whole lot of fun right now. I'm guessing that is particularly in these post PSSA weeks, there is a lot of extra fun happening, which I love to see. And just a lot of engagement on social media around those. These are cool. There's probably 6 different videos out there now of students. I think are they all seniors? Okay,
Yes.
all seniors just talking about co-curriculars, talking about what they're involved in, sharing a little bit of their stories. It was very cool to watch those. I think, John, this is from you as well. You covered a 70th class reunion, which was cool.
Yeah, it was one of the first reunions I went to where I wasn't the oldest guy in the room. Thanks.
Oh, good. And that's just a little reminder too that, you know, you don't stop being a part of the Pottstown family when you graduate. Some great advocacy happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago. It's been, you know, a long week already. But you know, we had students speak. Mr. Rodriguez spoke. A lot of students attended, which was really cool to see. And this event also got some news coverage, which is awesome. And Elizabeth did a great job. And last but not least, I love that we're not just on Facebook, we're also on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm trusting that this is going to show on the right screen, but this was from middle school Instagram page. I might have to let the video run twice through, just knowing how it goes every time I click on it. You see an Instagram show up? Okay.
Yep.
Except the problem is I probably did not hit the audio thing when I went to share. So y'all might have to go see that yourself. Was everybody able to hear that? Or no? Okay, that's what I was afraid of. That was probably my mistake when I went to share. Okay, that one, Pottstown Bowl, checked out, the students checked out 10,000 books this year. So they were celebrating, and it was just a quick little reel, but you could go follow them on Instagram if you are on there. And that is what I had for that slideshow. I've just been happy to take the time when we have these meetings to just show some of the highlights from what we've got on social media. And that felt like it just barely scratched the surface, but it was still so much to try to squeeze in there.
Mrs. Johnson, at our next meeting, you'll be able to talk about the entire winter season as it relates to everything that we've been doing in the school district. We just posted our Pottstown Pride winter
All that.
edition, so there'll be a lot. Only I think 59 pages worth.
Yeah, well, maybe next month I'll let you do the presentation and show that. I think that's what I'll do. Okay, awesome. So that is that. And just to stay on that just a touch longer, I just would like to encourage everyone, particularly board members, to make sure that you follow our social media pages. There's so much good stuff on there. And I often feel like it helps me have a pulse on what's happening in the district. Okay, we have a few things for presentations and discussions beyond that. The next one on the list is something called Hattie's List. Mr. Rodriguez, are you good to go ahead and share about that?
I am, if I get this correct. Mrs. Johnson, can you confirm that you're seeing a big white screen that looks like a split
Yes.
screen? Okay, very good. So this is hopefully good education for both board as well as our community. One of the things that we do, we often talk about research-based platforms or research-based software or research-based strategies, and that means something in all the educational jargon, but I wanted to be able to substantiate it in some way. So when we have gone through the past at least 2 iterations of our comprehensive planning, one of the documents that is given, well, we're given access to lots of different documents, and we've had different folks from the state or last time we actually hired someone to help us through this, and John Hattie is often mentioned. He is an educational researcher. You can Google him. It's out there. You don't have to look very hard. He's actually from Australia, and what he does research at the metadata level. So in other words, he doesn't just study what maybe someone going for their doctorate would do, which is to say, all right, I'm gonna have this program, and I'm gonna have these kids who are in the program, these kids who aren't, and I'm gonna see what happens. What he does is he takes all the different studies out there and categorizes them, and then begins to use data almost on it is a worldwide basis, although I'm not sure that all countries participate. A lot do. So then he has this scale, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. But before I do, the scale is basically like, if you think about 1, and in terms of a standard deviation, 1 is a really good number. So conversely, 0.01 is not a good number. Anything over 1 is an outstanding number. So what he does is he takes all these research studies across the world, he groups them all together, and the categories are there: the student, the home, the school, curriculum, teacher, teaching and learning approaches, and then he puts together this visual so that people can see it. So most folks know that one of the things I talk a lot about is teacher efficacy. So if you'll notice, number 1 in terms of ranking of influence, which what this means is how much does it affect student learning? And that's what this effect size is all about. So collective teacher efficacy, for as many years as I've been following this, is always pretty much number one. And what that means is if you put students in a room with a teacher who believes that he or she can make a difference in those kids' lives and believes that those students can achieve, that is the single greatest factor in determining outcomes for students. So in other words, really great teacher, really great learning. That's pretty much common sense, but it's a good starting point. So then the list goes on. Self-reported grades is number 2, teacher estimate of achievement, which not everybody understands that, and I won't take time now, but basically it's aligning what we think as educators, you know, like, hey, did my kids get that? If I know that my kids got that, then I can move at a faster pace. But if I don't know where my kids are, then I'm just moving through the curriculum, and that's probably not the best thing. So the list goes on. There's a lot of different things here. Teacher credibility, classroom discussions, scaffolding, which, you know, some people might remember we used to talk a lot about that, like scaffolding was going to fix everything. It's definitely a good thing. It didn't fix, none of these fix everything. So you can see intervention for students with learning needs, and reading intervention is actually on here too. I can't remember where, but it goes all the way through. It talks about spelling programs, acceleration programs, you know, memory, working memory strength and enrichment programs, and peer tutoring, and the list goes on and on and on. And it actually goes down. I think there's 252 on the list. So one of the things that definitely shows up here is that you know, lots of different strategies are going to have a positive effect. But what we want to do is make sure to map the strategies that we are utilizing with our effort. So if you know that something has, you know, like performance goals, okay, performance goals actually has a negative effect. So that's not a very good, a good example. But here, let me look at teacher subject matter knowledge. Teacher subject matter knowledge gets a 0.11 on the scale. So that doesn't mean that it's not important, but it does mean that we probably shouldn't spend a lot of time and effort making sure that every one of our teachers is a doctorate, because they may have their doctorate, and that is probably a good thing, but it's not necessarily going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. So I know that we've talked about lots of different types of programs. So I hope that's helpful, and I encourage you. I'm happy to send this to anybody who wants it, but I also encourage you. You can just Google that and find it yourself. It is very, very helpful, and I will tell you that it dispels a lot of ideas. I used to go, and I'll end with this. I used to go back and forth with one of our staff members, really nice guy. But you know, he was reflecting about how, you know, when his class, when there's a bunch of kids absent from his class, it seems to go much better. So the idea then, you know, he had, and of course you can Google anything and find a study that says that it's the best thing. So he found a study that said, hey, lower class sizes is the way to go. It's the way of the future. We should only have 15 kids in our class. And I understood where he was coming from, but when you look at some of the other research and blend it in together, you actually find that it's actually pretty low on the list. You know, you shouldn't pack 35 and 40 kids in your classroom. That has a negative effect for sure, but the standard 25 is actually pretty research based. No, once you get diminishing returns from 26 through 30, and then once you hit 30, it almost doesn't matter in especially at the high school level whether you have 30 kids in the room or 50 kids in the room. You're about as effective, and that's not a good thing. It's a lower effect, but it just demonstrates that when we make our effort, we want to make sure that it makes sense and it'll work, because nobody wants to work and then not see the fruits. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that is part of why I was interested in having you share that, is because over the years I've heard it referenced kind of here and there. But would you say this is something that is kind of in the context of a lot of the decisions that get made as far as curriculum or what strategies to lean into? Like, is this kind of like always in the mix as far as a resource that we use to evaluate what we're going to do?
Yeah, I will say that a lot of us, if it's not John Hattie, it's probably going to be somebody else. But a lot of us, when we make a decision or a recommendation, we want to make sure that it's actually going to work. So if it's not John Hattie, it's somebody else. But it's got to be someone who has the depth and breadth. Because one study won't do it. In fact, let me share this as a good example. Because I was having this exact conversation with a teacher at our middle school. If you look at number 222, which you might not be able to because it's too small.
Yeah, yeah.
There we
That's
go.
good.
Single sex schools, 0.08. So that means that there is some level of improvement based on having single sex schools. So that is actually very popular in Africa and a few other places. But it's, it affects things, but only a little bit.
That much,
As
yeah.
opposed to teacher efficacy or students being aware of their grades, and that sort of thing. Those are big movers, whereas this is a very small mover. And so I would say that if it's not John Hattie, which many of us in as school leaders know, if it's not John Hattie, it's got to be somebody, because we don't want to be making potentially multi-million-dollar moves and then not see any results. So we do the same thing, like the reason that we use Lexia or EduSeer or some of our other programs, it's because we've already judged them, and there's a few websites out there that will say, like, in terms of reading intervention programs, these are the actual not sales pitch results that have been collected from all these other entities. That's why we were so confident that some of these things would work, because we're seeing that research-based result that says, hey, if we use this with our students, others have used it and it's been good. So it's not a guarantee. There's no such thing as a guarantee. But it's definitely I think a very useful resource.
And it seems like a very big picture one. Like, I'm imagining that there's things on there that would be more or less effective if we would do them specifically in our context than they would be the average on that analysis. Like, so I think it's good to understand that. Like, it's not like a, hey, just plug this in, do this program, and since it was effective here, it's going to automatically work just as well for us. But I like it because it gives that context to the decisions that are made, and it gives like kind of a measuring stick. Like, how effective is this likely to be? How effective has this been for others? And of course, even then, it's a matter of doing it well. Of course, it's not just a matter of, you know, just, buy the program and all is well. Okay, thank you. That was helpful. I thought that was worth having, and I saw John ask for it to be sent to the whole board. So if we can all have access to the list, if we don't already, it probably is
Sure.
been sent out before, but
I'll give you mine. This was the most, I keep this on my desktop. So this is the one that we used in one of our iterations of, I think it was when we got started in 2020 with our comprehensive plan. So it ended up getting approved a little bit after that, I think. But so it's a little older. They don't change that much, but somebody could probably Google and find one that's a little bit more updated. But I will send this out.
okay, thank you. Any questions from board members about the list, any observations or whatever? Ms. Spence?
Sorry. I don't have a question, I have an observation. And if you want to move on with the meeting, you can. I can do it as a public comment.
Is it about the list?
No.
Okay, then yeah, let's wait and have it be a public comment. Okay, if
Gotcha.
there's nothing about the list, we can move on. And for this, I want to be very intentional with this next part. We said we were going to have a discussion about year-round school, which is an idea that Ms. Spence had put forward, and we brought over to this committee. This conversation can be all board. Like for now, the whole board is part of the committee. So let's just, you know, let that be known so that there's no like board members waiting for the other committee members or whatever. For the year-round school discussion, I kind of just wanted to approach it just asking some questions about what that would look like. So some very initial exploratory types of questions to get a pulse on what the options are there, and what that would look like for our school community and for our teachers, for our budget, for our schedule, all of that. So I will encourage everyone to use the hand raising feature. Yep. And we'll just go ahead and ask questions. Mr. Rodriguez, are you good to just kind of field some questions from board members?
Yes.
And I have questions, but I will go ahead and I'm going to let board members whose hands are raised and how they have them front of mind go first. So Mr. Hilton.
So my question is this, I'm not real familiar with the concept. I know that Allentown tried it with a couple of schools. Does all year round school simply mean you're basically going for the same number of days? You're just spreading it out over 12 months. Or does it mean you're actually going to go from 185, 190 days to 200, 250 days? What does all year school mean?
That is an excellent question, and I will give my answer. For the most part, those in the educational space are usually talking about 190 days being or 180, whatever it is, being split up over the course of the year. For example, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and doing kind of like that quarter of a time and then larger breaks. However, there are some models, especially in Vietnam and a few other Asian places where year-round school means 240 or 250 days. And there are variations as well. Some people or some school districts I know will say, hey, we have a year-round school option, but they're really just including what we have done in terms of summer school programming for half a day as an extended school year model. You can call it that. That's not traditionally what most educators would call a year-round school. Did that bring clarity? Did that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Ms. Spence.
So I like year-round school because in summertime, there's always a one is learning loss because we had school shut down for a year and a half, maybe less. I think we were the longest to stay closed or virtual. So you got the learning loss from that. You got the learning loss prior to COVID that still exists. And then in summertime, you have a learning loss to be out of school for 2 months. And our students are already behind. It's very difficult to catch up. So if school were, and when I say year-round school, I also mean, and I believe Philadelphia School District under Sherelle Parker, it's the same thing. It's certain amount of weeks on. It's still the same amount of days that they're in school. You can't, because of the teachers union, change that much. So they're in school for the same amount of days. They're just in school all year long with more breaks in between, which is the 3-week break in between. But yes, there are year-round school in other countries, and those students are very successful in school, far beyond our students here in the United States. But you can't fight the union. The union says the amount of days they want to teach, and we stick to that because unions are important. So anyway, when I say year-round school, I mean that concept because you don't have such a large gap in between that summer break, which is where most of our students have learning loss.
Thank you. Mr. Armato.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hilton and others got to the essential part, and that is a description of just what exactly are we saying when we say all year school, etc. And some other countries may have done it. I would be interested, as we were trying to move forward on this, I would be interested in hearing what other people have to say of how that would affect their lives and how that would affect what actions they were going to take. For instance, we talked about, I think Mr. Rodriguez, Ms. Spence said something about teachers and contracts and what they would be willing to do, not willing to do. Let's for a second assume that the contract issue isn't an issue. But now teachers might decide that besides a reason to leave the Pottstown School District is because they can make more money. Maybe another reason to leave is because they value what is, I suppose, considered traditional school that has a summer break. And likewise, perhaps families might consider that they want to be in a district that has more of a traditional schedule. I don't know. So maybe those are questions that we ought to be asking and find out answers for.
I mean, those are good questions. So I guess one of my questions is just if we're talking about more of that, 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off kind of model, what effect, if any, would that have on like the budget or our costs as a district? Or is that, I feel like I could look at like if we were going to go talk about going to 250 days, it's easy to be like, okay, well, here's, we can do some multiplication with that. But if it was the same number of days, but they were distributed differently, other than the things like having to account for maybe the fact that if teachers were more likely to leave or whatever, that like kind of some of those unknowns, would it have an effect on our overall budget?
I think you called, so let me just give what I believe is the most honest answer I can give. Theoretically speaking, if you do 100 and what do we do? Let's say 182 days of student instruction and 190 days of teacher contract, and of course our administrators who are in all year are in all year. Academically speaking, it should be budget neutral. There might be some heating savings, or if we shut down the building for, we can't save a whole lot. It would be the difference between, because our pipes would freeze, but it would be the difference between, keeping our buildings at, whatever we keep them at 70 or 72 during the winter, and being able to lower them down to 62 or so, just so long as our pipes stay warm, because that's a disaster nobody wants. It might increase a little bit if we're in over the summer because we're going to run our air conditioning a little bit more. We tend to run our air conditioning actually most in the fall. Just in terms of days, I could do the math on that, but I'm pretty sure it's just a few more days in the fall. However, the unknowns, I think, would be the place that we would need to think about for budget. And the reality is I don't know what it would cost. We'd have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it feels kind of like hard to put your finger on. I guess the other part that I want to make sure we touch on is, do you have a sense of the effect on teachers? I mean, we've touched on the whole union idea here, but like just generally speaking, has this been a conversation among staff before? Has it been like something we've ever like played around with and put out feelers, and you have a sense of what the feedback and attitude would be about it?
Yes, yes, we have talked about it. We have looked at some of the other Asian countries. I we're always throwing around ideas. I think that I could encapsulate the summary of those ideas with nobody was super excited about it. Nobody thought that it would be the game changer, so to speak. Um, but I mean that's just us talking. I think, and you haven't asked me this, but I'll say that if I were to guess, I would say that it would actually be parents that would have the most concerns, because 9-week, 3-week would be extremely disruptive. And I definitely have had many of those conversations. In fact, as you know, I've come to the board almost every year, reducing the number. And this has been since I've been superintendent. We used to have a lot of early dismissals. We used to have late arrivals. The attitude was, and I mean, I don't want to overstate or overplay this, but I think the idea was, hey, listen, this is what we got to do in school, and parents will live with it or figure it out. And then I think we've seen a shift to say, parents have said, like, living with this is not so easy. I have to get people in, in the beginning of the day. So then we dropped the late arrival stuff. That was just not popular at all. That died pretty quickly. But then the early dismissals, we've been taking them away slowly and figuring out other programming. They're very convenient for professional development and meetings for teachers. They're very convenient, but they're very inconvenient for parents. So that would be my biggest hesitation, more than everything we talked about thus far.
Ms. Spence?
Sure. So I think all year school, when we think about it, we have to think about it in a creative and innovative way. And we have to try and remove closed thinking. We have to be more open thinking and consider the student success and the teacher success equally, and not put the teacher above the student and the student above the teacher. Their success is together. They're one. The teacher can't be successful if a student is not successful, and vice versa. So I don't think we should look at it at how it would affect the teacher, how it would affect the student, and how it would affect the parent. I think we should look at it, all of those things together as a community. As a community, it would be the best thing for the community, because one, we'll have successful students. We'll have teachers that will have less stress because they're not going all in every day for a long period of time. They do get breaks in the middle. You will have less call outs, less sick days, less mental health days, because who wouldn't want a 3 or 4 week vacation in the middle of the winter when holiday times and things of that nature? Because I'm sure the 10-day holiday they get or the 7-day holiday they get is not enough. But overall, I think school can't go back to the traditional way, because the traditional way is not working anymore for the student and the teacher and the parent and the community. We have an increase in crime. We have a decrease in learning. We have an increase in teacher stress and anxiety. And we have an increase in the need for more policing of our communities. But if the students were in school, if they were increasing their learning, I think will eliminate a lot of these things that are social issues, right along with, academic issues. So if we look at it as this 360-degree approach, and not how will this hurt the teacher approach, I think we will be very much successful. And all the other communities that are thinking about doing this or are on the track to do it, they're looking at it as a full picture. How will it affect? Just give an example. In Philadelphia, for 2 hours after school, small businesses have to shut down because the students are so like, I don't want to say out of control, but
Disruptive?
intense, disruptive, intense after school, right? And so I see why they're doing that in Philadelphia. The crime is high and all those things. So if we want a better community, we have to think about the future. The future is not thinking backwards, traditional way of school, 9 to 3 or 7 to 3, and summers off is not beneficial anymore because we're not an industrial society anymore. We're on Zoom right now at almost 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, right? And students will have jobs like this as well. They'll be on Zoom. They can Zoom in to school right now when there's snow days. So that same approach, that same thinking that created us to be able to have a meeting in our homes, at least some of us are in our homes, at 9 o'clock at night, is innovative, it's creative, and it benefits everyone involved. So why do we not think that same way when it comes to our students, our parents, and our teachers and our business owners in as a 360 degree?
Mr. Amato.
Okay, again, I'm not arguing the benefits or the negatives to it, although I think earlier in this meeting, Mr. Rodriguez presented the Hattie chart that kind of shows what works and what doesn't work, at least what's been proven to work and not work. But as Ms. Spence said, hey, it's not just the teacher, it's not just the student, and it's not just the family. It is all three. And unless all three are working on the same premise and with the same goal, I'm not sure what would be successful. So again, if we're going to take a serious look at this, we need to hear what teachers have to say, we need to hear what students have to say, and we need to hear what parents have to say about what that approach would be. And in order for them to do that in a credible way, they would have to know what the plan looked like in the beginning. If you're going to ask me, hey, would this work for you or not work for you? I have to know what it is that you're asking me to work with.
Mr. Heidel.
I mean, my big concern is how it would affect the community in regards to, like, for example, athletics and co-curriculars. You work through a season. So there really wouldn't be a downtime because schools would still be open for those things. You know, after school, before school, summertime programming, how would that be affected? I'm concerned about that. And then also, I guess I don't want to say that that parents use school as childcare, but it seems that the system has always been built around. I know my kid has school from September through June. I got to worry about childcare for the summer. We have teachers and employees that say, yeah, I can get that extra job working childcare during the summer. I guess it's tough for me to wrap my head around because I do look at things within that cycle my entire life. So it is kind of foreign to me, but those are kind of things I worry about that are embedded into the situation. Yeah, without the community buying into it, I don't know. Certainly, I wouldn't be against, if there's enough people in the community that said, yeah, I'd be interested in something like that, a pilot program. But I don't see that we could just roll it out district wide and say, this is the new way to go. It's a big change. It certainly would be a huge change in thinking, and we would be on the cutting edge of it. That is for
sure. If I'm correct, Philly's proposal is also a pilot, right? Philly's school district is not in whole doing this yet. They're doing a pilot.
They're not doing it yet. I don't even think they're doing a pilot yet.
Okay, just kind of exploring.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Spence. I see you have your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think change is inevitable. Like 4 years ago, I didn't think the country would be shut down because of a respiratory disease that killed hundreds of thousands of people. So things happen and change is, it's like it's fluid, but we always still want to stick to this system of school. But the world is different from just 4 years ago. So it's if the world is different, our kids are different. That changed them a lot. And our teachers are even different. They're under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. So, and our parents are different because that was a lot to unpack and get their kids through at a very stressful time. But then we go back, right? Business as usual, schools, this to this. And a lot of kids are just not adjusting to that. They were out of school for so long that they got used to a different schedule, that attendance is even down overall, like countrywide. So because we are in a different time and we have to really adjust that time is different. So school should be different. That's all I'm saying. Obviously, parents and teachers will need to be on board, and the whole community will need to be on board, and change is scary, but it will happen whether we want it to or not, because change happens and we may be forced into it. Who knows?
Yeah, right. And to your point about the pandemic, we were forced into it. And one thought I had as you were talking is like it is inevitable that change happens. I think part of what we're doing now is discussing like what kind of change do we want? Like what are the things that we need to be leaning into? And just thinking about like what is the effective change? And so that's part of why I'm interested even in other communities that have rolled this out, have actually rolled it out and have seen results or not seen results, particularly with, right, because I'm getting the consensus here that most people, when they're saying year-round school, they're thinking still the 180 something days just spread out differently so as to avoid the summer slide, not thinking 250 days. Taking that model that there's consensus around, okay, this is what we're talking about. Has that worked other places? Like, has it been effective? And that's, I don't have the answer to that. And maybe does anybody actually know the answer to that? How effective that type of schedule is? Studies about it, or is it,
Well, it depends on what we're measuring, right? So are you like, it's all different key KPIs, like which one are we measuring? Like, are we measuring academic, like are we measuring PSAAs? Are we measuring teacher happiness? Are we measuring principal happiness, discipline? Like there's so many different, like
right.
The report that Mr. Rodriguez just put up, there's so many different metrics for success. Right now in PA, it's the PSAA. So if we're measuring it by that, then yes, it's successful because students achieve academic success when they don't have that learning loss. But if it's happiness of a teacher, then maybe that's different. If it's
and I guess I'm more thinking of the student outcomes, and honestly, more than the PSSAs, I think of graduation rates. But tests are interesting too. Do we have data that shows when we do this 9-week on, 3-week off model that we see test scores go up, that we see graduation rates go up, and by how much? Because the other thing I'm thinking about is, again, yes, change is inevitable, and we really do have to embrace new ideas. Just we want those new ideas to be the ones where we get the biggest return on investment, because any change we do, especially if it's a big systemic type of change, it takes a lot of time, energy, maybe money, maybe not, but it takes a lot out of us to invest in this new approach. Is it the best new approach to invest in, or are there other things to give us more bang for our buck? And I just don't have the answer to that with this particular thing. And that's kind of why I was asking if anybody had more data on it.
If we had the
Oh.
answer, we can sell it for $1 million. But I think every community is different, you know, so every community is different. You can't really just box it like that. And I think what other communities are doing is just testing and seeing if a small program, what the results are with that.
Mhm.
But I think just in our community, we do have a pilot that we're running. It's called Beach Street Studios, right? That's what it's called? Beach
Uh,
Street?
I don't know if that's a pilot anymore,
Yeah,
but
that's not a pilot. It was a pilot in its first year, and now it is a fully functioning program.
And it's very successful and it's all year round, correct?
It is very successful, and it is not all year round. We do have a summer program for those students who are very close and want to graduate. The state says that if you don't graduate by October 1, then you're a dropout. So a few of our students, the board has, and I'm very grateful for this, has supported us to have programming for those particular students who would miss the cutoff if we didn't have something for them to take credits. It is a small program. It's kind of a morning thing, but yes, we do provide that.
kind
And
of
it
like
is
summer
successful.
schoolish.
Yes.
It's successful. And is it kind of like the same idea of the summer school we do? Where it's like, it's not as big as the regular program, but it's something we provide in the summer.
It's actually quite small. So in our we would be in Beach Street, we would be full at 10 students. So it's purposefully designed to be small because these are, typically students, and of course if you talk to one student, you've learned one student story. And you talk to a different student, totally different story. But what we have found is that the flexibility and the individualized education is what has been the key for them to get across. But I think the point is that we and I don't want to speak for you, Mrs. Spence, but that definitely is a different program, and nobody else around has it. In fact, we often get requests for a certain school district in our vicinity to have students go there. And of course, we have to say that's not how Pennsylvania education works.
Ms. Bearden, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So years ago, long before COVID, our district actually looked at, and I mentioned this before, our district actually looked at being on a leader in this area and wanting to move towards all year education. We felt it could be helpful for students. We felt it would mimic and align with parents' work schedules. And we looked at, well, teachers also do summer school, and they pick up, jobs during the summer because they need the additional income. And this might be a win-win-win around across the board. That's how we kind of looked at it. We didn't know which way it would go, but we thought it would be a good possibility, considering other regions have utilized all year round academics. And when a survey was posed, and when that survey was responded to, it was a no across the board. And it kind of was surprising because, again, I thought, when you're in the workforce, usually, unless you're in education, you're working year round, summertime. This would have prevented daycare costs. It would have alleviated, concern of where a child was, because, a parent goes to work, they leave, their children at home with either each other or with a provider, and that that time the provider is done may not be the same. So we thought it really would alleviate concern and provide a good alignment that parents would be on board with, but they weren't. And they felt that it was, I think the overriding concern at that time, at least, was that children are children and they need time to be children. They were concerned with the mental health breakdown that the students would have in being in school year round. That was at least the concern then. So flash forward to post-COVID, we then said, hey, we know there's an issue. Let's try something again. Let's offer summer school, not as summer school, but for just educational purposes. Maybe the student is still going to pass to the next level, but will that student, or does that student have all of the items captured at the level that the parent and or staff believe they should be at? And so then it was, well, they're still able to pass, but do we want them to be, well, they're able to pass, or do we want them to be like considerably where they need to be educationally at the level? And so let's not call it necessarily summer school, but allow any student whose parent or teacher feel like, hey, we just want a little bit more of a deep dive because we didn't do well with online learning per se. So we offered that, and we didn't get a high turnout. We reached out, and we didn't get a high turnout from those who weren't in danger. And then, so I say that some schools have gone in the opposite direction. In the Midwest, they moved to a 4-day week. Board has looked at that in previous years prior to COVID, before staffing was as big of an issue across the board as it is for other districts. It was more of a bigger problem for us because we weren't able to provide the same level of salary that other districts were. So we considered, just throwing it around. I don't think it ever got much traction, but we considered a 4-day week in order to retain staffing and provide incentive and alleviate stress. That again didn't get much traction. What has happened in the Midwest is more staff has moved to those districts. They started as trial and pilots, and what they found was it reduced behavior issues. Students were less likely to be truant. They were more engaged, and the staff had a better morale. Now, as far as the parents, I thought the parents would be less likely to be in support of it, because that means they have to alter their work week. But as we are in the current stage, many companies, not most, but many have Fridays off or some modified Fridays, but you still could bring your students in, to the district if they needed. If you signed your student up, they could still come in on the 5th day, right? So I think what everyone has said is important, and credence to all of it. You would think that, full year schooling would be beneficial, especially now more than ever. But we certainly knew there was a need before now. We just didn't have the tie-in and the buy-in. As has been stipulated, I think we should put the survey out there again and see what exactly the parents feel, and staff communication, obviously, and perhaps even students. Not that we don't have an onus on our own to say that students should have X amount of schooling. We know that PDE requirements require X, but perhaps we should just go ahead and put this survey out there and see what the community thinks, what not just parents, but what the community thinks. then what the parents think, then what the staff thinks, and then what the students think, and have some better dialogue. I think everything that has been said so far is all of it has good credence, and you can't discount any of it, quite frankly.
Thank you. Ms. Spence.
Yes, I just would like if we were to put a survey out for us to have a town hall where we can share, because this is, the clock is ticking and you can't really explore deep dive into this topic in a 50-minute meeting. I think it would require several town hall meetings to communicate and share with the data with the parents and the teachers and the students about what it is, like what the topic is. Sending out a survey which is say, hey, what do you think about all year school? It's gonna come back no, because you didn't share what we're thinking about reimagining school. Students can go to work in the summer because work is learning. If anybody ever had a job, you sure learn a lot on the job. So and students could get credit for working during the summers because work is a lot of learning. And so if we could do it that way, I think that would be more effective, getting a real results back from a survey rather than just sending a blanket survey without any type of information to back it up.
Mr. Heidel.
To that point, I mean, we do have a group in the Family Advisory Committee who has done town halls, who have done meetings, certainly have a background in reaching out to the community members. I would ask maybe we reach out to them and ask them if they could facilitate something like this for us. I'd be for listening to the community and going out and meet with community members about it. I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Mrs. Johnson, can I?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. First of all, it's been a really great discussion. And I'm happy to have it. I would say I love the idea of FAC. I love the idea of getting a little bit more input. I would say that if this is something, this is just I guess I would say a caution. If this is something that the board is seriously thinking about, I would suggest that we do a lot of internal research. We look at what the studies have been. We talk to, empower me to talk to our different employees, because I think the danger is no matter what, as soon as we start talking about this, we could accidentally fracture our community or our community and staff. Because what if our just spitballing, let's say that we go to a 4-day schedule, and Mrs. Bearden brought out the fact that some folks in the Midwest have done this, and it's true. So if we move to a 4-day week, or we started talking about that and our staff love the idea, they're like, Friday's off, I'm in, and our parents hate it, or vice versa, then we have accidentally potentially caused a rift where there needn't be any. So I would suggest that, and I'm not sure if we're going to put this on the agenda again next month, but I would suggest that maybe we come up with a plan that would research the idea thoroughly. I mean, next year is set no matter what, so we do have the gift of time. We research thoroughly. We look at what others have done, lessons that they have learned, and then and we do have some great examples with Midwest districts or others, and then maybe go from there, so that as we speak about this publicly, we send the right message.
Yeah, I feel like it needs to be explored more. Like, even just as we were sitting here, I'm like, are there any studies about this? And what I found wasn't actually very promising, just to be honest with you. Not to say that my quick little Google search answers the question, but I feel cognizant of even exploring this takes a lot of administrative time. And which is not to say that we shouldn't explore it. I think that it's like a really good conversation to dip our toe in, and even just like broadly thinking of what new innovative ideas might be useful. And even just thinking of summer slide, what could we do to further improve our summer program, or what, like that direction of exploring is super valuable. My concern is I don't want to ask for something that's going to consume hundreds of hours of administrative time that potentially would be used for things that are going to be higher impact, higher return on investment. And that's my concern. But at the same time, you never find a new innovative idea if you don't invest some time into it. So I think it would be good to like dip our toe in, have those internal conversations more, and just do some research about, is this something that there's payoff for? I mean, to be honest, I also think it'd be good for us just to be keeping our eye on these other districts that are trying it currently in this context, in these next, couple of years. But yeah, having conversations with FAC folks, with staff members. And I do want to mention too, something that Phoebe Kancianik had mentioned. I feel like I can say that she's not in the meeting tonight because she's at North Bay, but she also mentioned, like, what about how it interplays with all of the other community organizations that provide childcare, that run summer camps. And here we have, other school districts still on a more traditional schedule, but then we're doing something different, which again, change is hard. So it doesn't mean it's not a good idea, but it needs to be a factor, just to look into how it would interplay with our other community partners. So I wouldn't want to go, personally, I don't think we should go fast, but I think it's worth, leaning in and exploring and seeing if it might be effective. Ms. Bearden.
Thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to say I wasn't endorsing moving to a 4-day week. I just want to put that out there, that I am not endorsing that. That was not the purpose of my statement. So I don't want to send the wrong message to anyone in the district saying, oh, go Mrs. Beard. I would love that. Hey, I would love it. But in the real world, I'm not going that far. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm in agreement that we explore and we do pay attention with what's going on in these other districts, because, we've talked about this and we've been keeping our finger on the pulse to pay attention to what was happening, including watching what Philadelphia School Districts has just done. It's not like we have not been paying attention thus far. We have been watching. I think we have been waiting to see the data come back. That this has, pole vaulted us into a different direction. And these conventions and conferences, the superintendents are all saying the same thing. If there was a magic pulse, they'd find, and someone had it, they'd share it, and we'd get there. So just putting that out there, I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. And I didn't think you were suggesting 4-day school week either. I think the data on that one is actually really bad from what I've seen as far as how good that is for student results. Mr. Hilton. You're on mute still.
To take up the point of using up a lot of administrators' time, we're 9:30. I think it's really time to adjourn. I mean, I don't care. I can just leave, but Mr. Rodriguez can't.
Thank you. Katina, your hand is still up. I assume you just didn't put it down yet.
Took it down. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that kind of sums it up. I think what I'm going to suggest is that we return to this discussion in a few months after, school's done and there's been conversations, a little research, and we can kind of bring it back up and see if we want to kind of keep digging in further, investing more. But my suggestion is we lightly invest right now, not heavily invest, just in the interest of return on that investment. I'm just looking here. So advocacy, I kind of gave my updates before well enough anyway. I will just say next week there is a power interfaith presentation. It's largely going to be focused on the effect of funding on taxes, unfair funding on taxes specifically. And there'll be a few school board members, including myself, but also one from Pottsgrove presenting, and other folks from business, real estate, that sort of thing that can speak to the impact of taxes. So you're all very welcome to come to that. Is there any other business or anything that needs to be addressed? Okay, and any public comment?
Not at this time, Mrs. Johnson.
Okay. Okay. Then I think we can end the meeting. The next meeting looks like June 13th. We'll see you all later next week or whenever. Have a good night.